Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are you getting on there today? Welcome to the big debate here on the Aontú Facebook page and also the Aontú Ireland YouTube channel. And we're delighted to be able to have a conversation with you today on the issues that are of major importance this week. And my God, we're living in serious times here at the moment. There's so much of real importance, of real serious nature happening at the moment. And I want to just have a brief discussion with you in relation to the actions that we in Aontú are involved in across the country to stand up for your rights at the moment. The first issue is Aontú seems to be acting as the only opposition to the government currently. Most of the parties of the opposition, be it Labour, Soc Dems, People Before Profit, etc., they have decided to go down a zero COVID route, which is an incredible decision. What it means is over the next number of months, Roisin Shortall has said that COVID has to get down below 10 cases a day before Ireland should leave level 5. And the only way to achieve that low number of COVID over the next number of months is pretty much for everybody to stop breathing, because this illness is going to circulate within society. Sinn Féin, on the other hand, are simply sitting on the fence on this. They're adding no real opposition to the government actions. And the government actions are unbelievable. And most people that I speak to don't realize this, but today marks the 190th day of lockdown in Ireland. It's the 190th day of workplace closures. Now, how do we compare to, let's say, other European countries? No other European country has had workplace closures for as long as Ireland. Indeed, Ireland is a multiple of other European countries. So, for example, we have a situation whereby Germany would have about 50 tops lockdown days. Other countries would be similar. So Ireland is 2 or 3 times the amount of workplace closures. So the manner in which our government has responded to COVID is a massive outlier. Nobody comes near us in relation to the level of lockdown. Now, that hasn't been of major benefit to our death rate or our illness rate. Those rates are roughly the same as countries such as Germany. So this country, the government has leaned on lockdown far more. Why? Because it made a horlicks of, first of all, the vaccination rollout. Really dependent, completely dependent on the EU, and the distribution here was waylaid when it could have been much faster. It's made a complete mess of the nursing home situation. And I think the nursing home situation, the epicenter of the crisis in Ireland, is an absolute disgrace that so many of the most vulnerable people in our community to this illness were left so exposed to this illness. And nearly half the people who died of this illness died in nursing homes. The government also failed in terms of protecting the country. They have given an open door. You and I can't move 5K down the road while people were invited to travel from all over the world into this country without any checks or balances whatsoever. And also, hospital capacity. One of the reasons why this government has leaned so much on lockdown is because our hospital capacity is incredibly poor. We don't have the ICU beds, we don't have the hospital beds for normal society, never mind an illness such as this. And finally, the All-Ireland cooperation never happened. This country, if it was hit by foot and mouth disease, would cooperate north and south, but this government never really made an effort, and the Northern Executive never really made an effort to deal with this as one unit, unfortunately. So as a result, the government have leaned on restrictions, and those restrictions have been incredibly damaging to full swathes of society. Today, I raised with the Dáil the issue of cancer services. You've heard me say that 480 people will get cancer today. 24 people tragically will die of cancer today. And yet cancer services are not operating properly in this state and won't be back up and running properly until the end of the year, according to the current government plan. So we have, I raised this with Micheál Martin today, and he told me to get real. It's an incredible situation that the Taoiseach of the country is pushing back at anybody trying to get cancer services properly up and running. issues with housing. And the reason I mention these issues is because the government obviously made a statement yesterday about the next phase of restrictions. And these are the issues what I think that the government have made a mess on. Housing. 79 people died in homelessness just in Dublin just last year. There are 9,000 people homeless. Because of the restrictions in the building of houses in the state, 10,000 houses have not been built this year. Somebody needs to join the dots in government. The housing crisis hasn't gone away. It may have been eclipsed for some by this illness, but it has not gone away. And the government has allowed for social houses to be built during this period, which is great, but haven't allowed for private houses to be built. Both sets of houses go into the same pot. They both make homes for people. The supply of both, has an effect on rents and house prices. And the lack of supply of both sends up rents and house prices. And unless we get houses built, we're going to see further housing issues in the future. Incredible, yesterday, the government, didn't do anything for children's sports. The children can be inside in the classroom, but can't be outside in the football pitch, is an incredible thing. Parks will be full this weekend. You can tip around, a park, a full packed park this weekend. Don't bring a golf club. Bring a golf club. You're on your way home. It's important if the government are going to impose restrictions that those restrictions are logical. Illogical restrictions undermine all the restrictions. And an issue that's hardly been mentioned as well is the issue of religious services. It's an incredible thing because, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights has said that the practice of religion is a human right. And that's no small thing. And millions of people in Ireland believe strongly that, religious practice is an essential element to their lives. Now, the churches are the biggest buildings in each town, and yet they're closed. And yet the local Lidl across the road is full of people buying crisps and wine and chocolate and beer. And fine, I have no problem with that. But there is a lack of consistency with regards to the restrictions there. It does not make sense. And it is really weird that we're coming up a few days from Easter now, and none of the political parties outside of Aontú raised this issue. We're living in such a woke Dáil at the moment that the political establishment is afraid to mention a human right such as this that is of importance to millions of people in the States. It's an incredible thing. Ireland joins a very small and infamous club, which includes countries like Saudi Arabia and North Korea. Other countries haven't closed down religious services, in the manner that Ireland has. One of my big frustrations is how Ireland, this government has kowtowed to the European Union. The European Union has made a mess of a large number of issues, from the European Centre for Disease Control, not tackling travel at the start of this illness, to the mess with vaccines. And now we hear that there's going to be about a €300 million cut to Ireland's COVID support funds by the European Union. Why? Because we have this leprechaun GDP, a GDP that's not representative of this country, that's radically inflated by much of the foreign direct investment that exists in this country. All welcome, mind you, but it's just the inflation of the GDP that's problematic, because what it means now is Ireland is rated to have an economy far stronger than it actually has. And as a result, it's become a net contributor to the EU, and our funding from the EU has been radically cut. Yes, the FDI sector, the foreign direct investment sector, the pharma, the tech sector is doing very well, but the indigenous business is on its knees. And the cost of this is incredible. They reckon by 2025, there will be a €270 billion debt in this state. Third highest in the planet, every single worker owing €100,000. Now, what that will mean is we will simply be put back to where we were in 2008, 2009, and 2010. And they will, it's around the corner, the government are not mentioning it, but they will seek to cut back on public services, and they will seek to increase taxes. The government are like an owl fella at a wedding at 5 o'clock in the morning, half cut, completely oblivious to the hangover that awaits them 3 or 4 hours' time. And that's going, Ireland will have a significant financial hangover in the next couple of years, which is a disaster. AIM2 has continued to make sure that we argue for the government that we have a logical system in Ireland. And we have fought for people who are not being represented. We've asked the hard questions that no other political party is asking. I'll give an example of this. I got a phone call of a student. The student is doing speech and language. She had COVID, so she has the antibodies of COVID. So she is as immune to it as if she had taken a vaccine. So in many ways, nature has vaccinated her. Now, she has 2 weeks left of her practicals, and the HSC has told her she must take a vaccine. She must take an AstraZeneca vaccine. She doesn't need it. It's only a box ticking exercise. And she has a problem with the vaccine. Now, the government said when we asked them at the start of this, we asked them, like, we obviously aim to oppose mandatory vaccination. It should be up to an adult to, in good faith, decide whether they want to take a vaccine or not. So we asked the government, to make sure that there would not be mandatory vaccines. And they promised us that there wouldn't. And here we are with the HSE having a mandatory vaccine through the back door and forcing students to take it. Now, it's important to recognize this, that in Germany and in Canada, in the last 2 days, they have suspended the AstraZeneca vaccine for the cohort of these students. So, students watching what's happening internationally, but still being told by the HSE, take this or get stuffed. It's absolutely wrong. Secondly, the much will have been heard in relation to the change of the government's rollout of the vaccine. So previously, it was on the basis of risk. So in other words, particular cohorts of people, professions, people who work in risky situations were prioritized for the delivery of vaccines. So people like carers, because an individual depends on a carer. Without that carer, that individual who is ill, who has a disability, for example, is in trouble. People like SNAs who work with children with special needs, who can't obviously socially distance or find it very difficult to socially distance. And people like Gardaí, who may be, arresting people in a riot in the country. And people like teachers, for example, all were positioned on a priority for the delivery of this. Now, 2 days ago, the government were saying that this priority list was on the basis of best medical evidence. Yesterday, they flipped it. They threw that list in the bin and basically decided to have another list. And the list is now on the basis of age. And they're telling us, well, and the Taoiseach said this to me today in the Dáil, age is the critical factor with regards to risk. Now, for the last year, they've been telling us that mobility and activity is the critical factor with regards to risk. And now they've changed that. And I'll tell you the background to this, and we in AIM2 were raising this when nobody else is raising it, but Ireland doesn't have a central database of patients. It's the reason why when you go to the hospital, there's all of these physical documents. When you need to go from one doctor to a consultant, they have to physically transfer sometimes the documents. We don't have a central database of patients like they do in Denmark. So the government didn't know how to work out the cohorts, the professions, etc. They were relying on GP lists and consultant lists. And as a result, lots of people were falling through the cracks. So we were hearing about people with stage 4 cancer who were being bounced hither and thither from a consultant to a GP and still not getting the vaccine. And so the government basically, because they had 6 months to put the system in, they didn't put the system in place. And now they've changed the system. Their decision is not based on best medical practice or science. It's based on their incompetence and their inability to put in systems into this country that makes the healthcare system work properly. They sell Ireland as a tech Ireland, yet the HSE is a tech desert, unfortunately. So there's just a number of issues that we've been pushing for in a big way over the last while. Obviously, the advertised clore or agenda for tonight's debate is the issue also of Irish unity. And I want to speak with regards to that too. We're coming up to the Easter Monday. And Easter Monday, as you'll know, is a time where Irish Republicans think about the men and women who came out in 1916 and in the Tan War or the War of Independence. We think about those individuals for two reasons. One, because they made a massive sacrifice. In many cases, the complete sacrifice of their lives for freedom of Ireland. And thankfully, we have in the 26 counties some level of democratic freedom, and hopefully in the 6 counties we will have independence and freedom shortly. But we think about, and we remember the people of 1916, first of all, to show respect to that massive sacrifice that they made. Secondly, we do this, we remember 1916 on Easter Monday, because we also look at the objectives that these men and women fought for. And these men and women fought for 3 major objectives. For the independence of Ireland's north and south. They fought for economic justice, that people earn a living, put a roof over their heads, that they could get access to healthcare, education, and they also fought for, which is very interesting, to cherish all the children of the nation equally. And that really important word there is all. Incredibly, Aontú is now the only political party on the island of Ireland that fully adheres to the objectives laid out in the proclamation of the Irish Republic, read on the steps of the GPO in 1916. It's a sad thing to say, but we, as a party, recommit to those objectives every Easter Monday. Now, there's a big debate happening with regards to Irish unity. COVID, for example, Brexit, these are all showing the illogical nature of a border within our country. The idea that Boris Johnson and the Tories can still determine what actually happens in Ireland is just an incredible situation. The idea that the people of the North still don't have self-determination, that their determination, for example, to stay within the EU was scrunched up into a ball by the Tories and flung into a bin, is an incredible thing. But there's a number of interesting things happen. Within the Good Friday Agreement, there is a responsibility for the Northern Secretary to call for a referendum in the north of Ireland for Irish unity if he or she feels that there will be a majority for that. The demographics, the Brexit, all of these other issues have led to a growing support for Irish unity and a reduction for the union between Ireland and the north of Ireland. And indeed, political unionism is now, only in the last couple of years, in a minority situation. So what I mean, the interesting point about that is the Southern government has no say whatsoever in relation to whether or not there'll be a referendum. So we are getting closer to a situation where a referendum could be called, Irish unity could be achieved, and the Southern government has sat in its hands and not organised or not planned or not developed in any way for it. We could actually be like where the Brits were on the eve of the Brexit referendum. The referendum could pass, but nothing could have been done to organise for it. So we in Aontú have been asking that the government would start organising. What we've been calling for is a new Ireland Forum, a forum where all of civic society, all the political parties can get together on a regular basis and start to work out a number of steps towards unity. Now, you might have seen the Claire Byrne show, and oftentimes in the media they ask questions of people. They say, well, what's the flag going to look like? What's the anthem going to look like? What are these types of things going to look like? The truth of the matter is, the more difficult and more important elements of this is what Ireland is going to look like in the future. And I'll give you an example. 3 years ago, I wrote a report about the All-Ireland economy. It was the first time, believe it or not, that a committee in Leinster House had carried out a report on the All-Ireland economy since the foundation of the state, since partition. Now, I interviewed loads of people, different backgrounds, some of them unionists, some of them nationalists, some of them in between. And I was amazed that pretty much everybody, these are farmers, trade unionists, they were workers, they were business people, they were healthcare workers, they were churches, etc. And I asked them, what is the commonality that we have here? And every one of them agreed, if we plan together, if we fund together, if we deliver services together, there'll be better services for people. People's lives will be improved. They'll also be more efficient, so the costs will be less to the state. Now, even if you took the prism of unity out of the system and you said, okay, let's work towards this commonality. Let's work towards a situation where we're merging elements of the country together, that would be beneficial. So we in Aontú want that New Ireland Forum to look at things like the cross-border ambulance, like cross-border healthcare and cancer services, like excise duties, like income tax, like motorways and rail lines, etc. We want to make sure that we have a country that's planning, funding, and delivering together. And that's the first element. The second element is then we start to work out what kind of Ireland that we will have in the future. And for us, a proper health service is key. Let me tell you, there'll be people from a nationalist background as well as a unionist background who will be very, very cautious of Irish unity if it means that they will lose the National Health Service. So if we're going to be real about Irish unity, we need to make sure that we have a proper health service in the south of Ireland that's akin to the one that's enjoyed and experienced in the north, that people are not losing rights to their health care to achieve that. There's some of the issues that we're looking at. The one other really important element of this debate is Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have started to talk as if they're in favour of Irish unity. But it's interesting, we listen to the small print sometime in the future. They don't want to see a referendum happen in the next 5-10 years, for example. And one of the arguments they say is that, well, it can't be just 50% plus one. It can't be a majoritarian United Ireland. And let me tell you, I don't want a 50% plus one. I want to persuade and encourage and attract people from a former unionist background into this United Ireland. Aontú is a party of Catholic, Protestant, and dissenter. We are a party of wolf tone, and we believe in that diverse Ireland. But the Good Friday Agreement directly says that a majority will decide whether it stays within the Union of Britain and the North of Ireland, or it will be United Ireland. Now, for Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael to say that they no longer agree with that means that they no longer agree with a key element of the Good Friday Agreement, that they're binning a key element of the Good Friday Agreement. But that's incredible. They won't say that out loud, but that is the context of their change of policy on that. So, and the second element of this is, they say that they don't want people to be coerced into United Ireland. Now, breathe deeply, Accordia. Right now, the union exists on the basis of 50% plus one. Right now, nationalists are forced into a political country that they do not agree with. What Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are saying that they don't agree with to the create of United Ireland, they're basically agreeing to force nationalists into a so-called United Kingdom. That's an incredible thing. To give unionism a veto of 50 of a minority veto with regards to Irish unity is a form of coercion. It can't be good for the goose and not good for the gander. It has to be equally delivered. So there's a big opportunity here, and people should see Irish unity as an opportunity. One, because there's a justice that is really real in Irish unity. Two, because it will radically improve our economic basis in this country. It'll create a bigger market. It will give us more votes in the European Union. It will give us more impact internationally. And I believe it will improve the economy north and south. And I believe that it will give unionists more of a democratic impact in a 32-county Dáil than they could ever have in London. And the truth of the matter is, in London, the Tories don't really care about unionists, and that's very, very clear. And I'll give you another example, proof of that. Just in the last couple of weeks, Brandon Lewis, the British Secretary of State for the North of Ireland, stated that he was going to commission really, really extreme abortion law in the North of Ireland. And this law is more extreme than the South of Ireland, and it's more extreme than even in Britain. And he's doing it against the will of the people of the North of Ireland. So the majority of people, when they're polled in the North, say that they want Stormont to decide this issue. Even those who are pro-choice say that they want Stormont to decide this issue. It's a devolved issue. According to the Good Friday Agreement, it should be within the democratic wishes of the people of the North of Ireland. Now, the astounding thing of this is both Michelle O'Neill, Mary Lou McDonald, and Colm Eastwood have been pushing as hard as they can to cajole and lobby the Tories to enforce this in the North. Now, that's an incredible thing. For 200 years, Republicans have gone to London and told London that they had no right to legislate for any part of Ireland. That's changed. New Sinn Féin, in the same way what the officials back in the early 70s, are now going to London and telling them to legislate for the north of Ireland against the wishes of the people of Ireland. They're getting the idea of self-determination and they're throwing it in the bin. They're saying that the Irish people making decisions for Ireland is no longer good enough. That's a radical change, and one that probably hasn't been understood in Republican heartlands across the north of Ireland as well. On the SDLP side, it's incredible. Colm Eastwood and Claire Hanna, the South Belfast SDLP MP, wrote a letter to Brandon Lewis demanding that he commission these extreme abortion laws in the north of Ireland against the wishes of the people of the north of Ireland, but also against the wishes of the majority of people within the SDLP. The SDLP is incredible, and this is like it's an interesting way that political parties develop. Once the leadership of a political party changes direction on an issue such as this, what happens is your hungry, ambitious middle management, they follow suit because they're not really, they don't have a conviction either way in the particular issue. They just want to get on, see their careers develop. But what happens is many of the, let's say, right to life people that exist within those political parties, they become silent. I've spoken to SDLP people, councillors across the north. They say, no, they don't agree with what Colm Eastwood's doing. And I've said, well, tell me what you've done about it. Tell me about the letters that you've written into your local paper, or the statements that you've made, or the efforts that you've made. And say, well, they haven't really done anything. They become silent. And the same thing happened within Fianna Fáil. Most of those people who stood with me in a photograph back a couple of years ago saying that they supported the right to life are now silent within Fianna Fáil. They don't want their voices to be heard. So as a result, anyways, Aontú is looking to make sure that we protect the Good Friday Agreement, protect devolution, protect the right to life. We simply believe that everybody should have a right to life. Everybody. For us, this is the human rights debate of our time. The idea that one individual human being, for whatever reasons, has a legal right to end the life of another individual living human being is wrong. We need a society that is compassionate. We need a society that supports and helps parents to be able to raise their children to their full potential. And we in Aontú are looking to make sure we build that particular society. What we're looking to do at the moment, we're taking legal advice to see can we bring a case against Brandon Lewis to defend the Good Friday Agreement and also to defend the right to life of everybody in the north of Ireland. We're calling for a meeting with Brandon Lewis, even though he hasn't responded as of yet. But we will build a campaign across the country, across the north of Ireland, to make sure that nationalists and Republicans do not have their voices distorted by a Sinn Féin or SDLP leadership that do not represent them. But the one thing I will say to people in the north who may be listening to this particular debate here, don't have your heads hanging low. Don't feel sorry for yourself. Don't be disempowered into passive inactivity. If you feel strongly about this, get up off your knees and start getting active now. This is the time. There's no point in giving out about this for years to come. There's no point in sitting on the fence, whinging or giving out. It's important that you become active. When good people do nothing, we see things like this happen. And I would encourage you, we have a website, aontú.ie. On that website, there is a membership box. Click that box, put your name down, sign the dotted line, and stand up for your core values. There's no excuse for people to have this defeatist attitude. We have a serious opportunity coming up in the next year with the Stormont elections. Aontú is organising throughout the 6 counties. Our members are developing new common. We're selecting local area reps. We will be standing in Stormont election. We will take votes of Sinn Féin and the SDLP, and we will send people into Stormont to represent your views. But we can't do it by ourselves. We need you to help us. So that's a quick rundown of the political issues that are affecting the people right through Ireland's north and south. three major issues that are happening. Obviously, things are very, very difficult on families. And we're going to keep pushing for all of those bread and butter issues, all of those life and death issues, those issues of housing, healthcare, education, infrastructure, regional development. It's an incredible thing. 2 days ago, Heather Humphreys, the minister in the South, launched a document about regional development that was an empty husk. It didn't have any specific details and didn't have any specific funding. And as a result, it literally gave lip service to what is a crisis of a lopsided country developing towards Dublin and the regions emptying out. We'll leave that issue to another day. The next meeting we're going to have a special guest. I was speaking to Eamon O'Queeve of Fianna Fáil, and I asked him to see would he join us on our next meeting. So I hope to be able to organise that, and we can have a debate and a discussion. The objective from now on is to open this up further, so the questions that are asked through a live feed are fed to myself and maybe Eamon O'Queeve, the Fianna Fáil TD, so that we can answer those questions. Anyways, thanks for listening tonight. Thanks for tuning in. As I said, click the button for membership. And just the last issue there, I just wonder, can you see I'm supporting our Aontú badge. This is the Aontú Easter Lily badge. It's available on our website, and we wear it with pride every Easter for the men and women who stood for Ireland in our time of need. And I'd encourage you to purchase it from our website. Bermila Mahaguth, Ihawa, Thankla Nahangel, and we'll be talking to you soon. It's long before.